a day.
Whoa.
Whereas the honeybee in an exact same orchard will only visit 50 to 1,000 flowers a day. So if you have a couple of acres of apples, you don't need as many native bees,
Right.
as you do honeybees.
Right.
And there's mason bee houses available to attract them and keep them in your orchard. Now, in that case, it's a situation where you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So you may put the house out there, and it may work, and it may not work. And most times, they find a home there for you.
I mean, your best bet, right? Get some flowering plants, some nectar-producing plants. Put it next to the mason bee house, and the two will work together. You give them the home and their forage all in one.
Yeah, stick it right in the orchard.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Or right in the tree itself. I think that's about it. So the efficiency of the native pollinators is like 35 to 115% more than the honeybees.
Right. But the reason we use honeybees, and honeybees are responsible for such a large percentage of our crops and pollinating such a large percentage of our crops, is that we'll call it it's not exactly the swarm, but the whole colony can be transported because they all go back to the hive.
It's ease of operation.
Ease of operation.
Yeah.
Now that, the native bees, they're so productive, thousands of blossoms throughout the day, transferring that pollen, they're also pretty resourceful.
In what way?
From what I understand, a lot of them, they'll find natural remedies for themselves amongst the plants.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? That 100 million year evolution process. The colonists and the Native American Indians knew what plants could give them what remedies, so that they would go to those plants and dig up the root for a toothache or whatever. And same relationship is affects the bees too and the flowers. So this is really new stuff that we smart humans are just finding out. Mm-hmm. And there was an argument, especially in the Amazon, that we shouldn't be digging up and burning the Amazon because there are plants that we haven't discovered there yet, and their uses may be lost to us if we dig them up. And it's the truth. For example, aspirin. Mm-hmm. Aspirin is naturally, or that same salicylic acid is in willow bark. And the Indians used to chew on willow bark for, let's say, a toothache or something like that, just to relieve the pain. Now we have acetaminophen and all the rest of them, but aspirin's still out there and it's still very effective. And only within the last 100 years has it become a synthetic, made in the lab.
Yeah.
Before that, we were still chewing on willow bark.
Yeah.
Well, the same way with pollinators, if they're sick, where do they go? We go to a pharmacy.
Right.
And we buy a decongestant. Okay, well, when they have the sniffles, where do they go? One study that I'm aware of, and there's very few studies, far and few between, that I've come across, the bumblebee. Bees are plagued by parasites too, and there are certain mites that detach rides and they start sucking the juices out of a bee, and so it's very not only irritating, but it can weaken a bee. So there is a compound in a native chelone, and we know that as the turtle head. It's a white turtle head. I've seen it in Connecticut forests, and it's available as a native plant. But the bee goes in to these flowers at a higher rate when it has this mite attached to it, and there's a compound in there which, to my knowledge, is still not identified, that helps that bee fight that mite. They dislodge it and get it out of there. Mm-hmm. Which is so interesting because there's these little natural pharmacies out there that the bees know about. Certainly the Indians knew about it, and the colonists knew about it too. But we're so far away from nature, even though we don't think we are.
Yeah, we
still go to the pharmacy for the ibuprofen.
We do. Well, there's some efficiency there.
Right. But that's why it's important. Yeah, there is. But if there were no pharmacies, what would happen? If there was no acetaminophen, what would happen? So this is why it's so important for gardeners, for your customers, for everyday people to look out, understand, and plant native plants, because the hydrangea out there was developed to attract humans, and it does very well. The famous bass fishing lure out there, it was made to attract bass? No. It was made to attract fishermen who would think, hey, this looks like something a bass might like. Okay?
Right.
Well, it's the same way with plants. Native plants may not be the most eye-appealing out there. They're not sexy. They're not the prima donnas out there. They're not the fashion queens.
Yeah.
But they're the salt-of-the-earth plants that provide heaven knows what to this relationship that's happened over the last 100 million years.
Yeah. You know what? One of my favorite native plants that people have been seeking out more and more, we have available more and more, is the swampweed, swamp milkweed.
Yeah.
Which is I don't want to call it a replacement, but since we have, fading availability of the natural milkweed that's a more or less an invasive plant in our area, the swampweed is one you can plant. It's not an aggressive proliferator, and it actually has like a nice pinkish flower on it.
Yeah.
And that's the home to the monarch butterfly.
Yeah.
And it does two things for the butterfly. The leaves in the stem provide a home for it to go through its caterpillar stages and feed on. And then when it finally becomes that butterfly, the nectar from the flower is available to feed the fully grown butterfly. And then as let's say the monarch goes through its generations throughout one season. So the monarchs migrate up here in the spring. I think just about now, early to mid-June,
Mm-hmm.
they all started arriving on their journey all the way from the central Mexico area. And they come up here. And then through the summer, multiple generations will be produced. And then finally in September, and it does depend on your zone of when they start heading south again.
Right.
But for Connecticut, we're at latitude 41, which means our zone right around mid-September, the monarchs start heading south again and will make their journey from Connecticut all the way to Mexico.
And that's 4 generations removed from their great-great-great-grandparents that came up this way, but they don't get lost. How does that happen?
You know what?
They head right to Cancun and spend the winter there.
Right.
You know?
I've still never been to Cancun, and these guys are like, hey, we're going.
Yeah, and you have to take American Airlines in order to get there.
Yeah, right? And you probably have to connect through Dallas or something.
Yeah, and there's that special relationship, too. Not only, milkweeds of different varieties of native plants. And just as an aside here, native plants, when they can't be bred. They're not bred like hydrangeas are in a nursery somewhere. Mm-hmm. Most of them, in order to remain native, have to be a natural progression, found, and then propagated. So they still remain native.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And they have to be stable and all that. But in the case of the monarchs, they get the same nutrients from the flower, but also the caterpillars get to eat your plant and get the same toxicity, although in some cases they'll go to I was at a garden center the other day, and I was watching this black swallowtail landing on the only dill plant that was left. And I'm looking at this dill plant and saying, maybe I should pick it up. And then all of a sudden I see the black swallowtail lower her abdomen and place a very small egg on it and then go to another part. So by the time she was done, she had put 12 eggs on it. I'm saying, well, if I buy this plant, I'm going to get some neighbors and it's going to get eaten. But I can't squash the eggs because that would be the wrong thing to do.
It would.
So I left it there, and hopefully somebody else won't notice the eggs and
bring it home,
and we'll have a whole new. What was I going to do?
Brood going. Yeah, it's a tough one. Cool. So as in conjunction with growing, the native plants like the swamp milkweed that promote the monarch butterflies, the different nectar producing plants that help the bees or become available for the bees, and creating that environment for them, and us gardeners doing our part. There's also some safer practices we can do with different insecticides we're using in the garden. Actually, the one that we were asked to bring to the Save the Bees Festival was BT, which is an insecticide, a natural insecticide.
Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacteria that,
Right. Yeah. It's a bacteria that becomes toxic to the insects. However, is not.
The Lepidoptera, the worms, the caterpillars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what everybody's really interested in, right? We have the gypsy monster back, the caterpillars are out, and we're looking for something, they're invading our trees.
Right.
And we want something to treat them.
Right.
However, especially with the group that, attends the Save the Bees Festival.
The butterflies, you're killing the butterflies?
Yeah. Well, right. So, anyway, the BT, it's safe for the bees. That bacteria produces this protein crystal that's toxic to the caterpillars. However, is not toxic to the bees.
That's right. Just remember, though, it's how you apply it and when you apply it. Just like you said, a gypsy moth caterpillar is going to go up a tree and it's going to chew on a leaf, right?
Yep.
Okay, to foliate its plant. And that's how it picks up the BT toxin.
Right. It's contact.
Right. Yep. Now, let's say a monarch butterfly caterpillar is eating that plant too, but it's toxic as anything. Now it may affect it or not, but the butterfly itself, if it was on another plant getting nectar, would only be touching the flower. Now there's this: how much of the toxin is absorbed into the plant and all that. General rule of thumb: don't, whether you're using organic pesticides like BT or commercial pesticides, and I'm going to have to spank your hand when you do, but don't never spray when the flowers or when a plant is flowering. Do it before or do it after, but not during. And that way you'll protect the pollinators. Right.
And so I think with that, using the safer insecticide and also safe practices, we can do our part too. And,
that's right.
As part of managing our garden. And I think that's at least the better approach we'd recommend to
know
people.
Your pest, know your pesticide, and know how it works.
Yeah.
And any stop at Mackey's can explain. I mean, you can read it on the back of the package too.
Yeah.
But it's so important to know that, and the people at Mackey's can tell you how it works and what not to do.
Yeah. Honestly, our team, this is like something they're all fascinated. We sent a whole group to a full day kind of a refresher training in February, getting ready for this and understanding the different pesticides out there, safe application. Because not only are we concerned about the pollinators and making sure that's safe, but also safety for ourselves and safety for our pets. That's probably the biggest question we get, being both pet supply and garden center.
That's right. It's the same way with pets too.
Yeah. Yep. You got to be safe. So with that, I think we've made our run through our pollinator topic in honor of Pollinator Month.
Ta-da!
There we are. And again, please email us your questions, suggestions, thoughts. Even just any email, a blank email, will get you entered into the grab bag drawing.
Even
for
a
next
blank
week.
email? This is like Craig Ferguson reading his emails.
Just, as long as we can reply back and tell you you've won.
Yeah. And you know what? You can write your request on the back of a $20 bill. That might get you.
It will be at random, but there probably won't be a return on that 20.
No.
All right.
Thanks, Terry.
Awesome, Len. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you all soon.
You betcha.
Thank you all for listening. For notes from this episode, visit the podcast section of our website at mackeysgrows.com. Also, we'd love to hear your topic ideas or questions, so drop us a line through our website's contact page. If you found the information in this podcast useful or simply just enjoyed our chat, we'd truly appreciate it if you could leave a rating and review on your preferred listening app. It helps share our show with others and lets us know to keep working hard. Thanks again, and remember, where that is and what you love, that's home. Mackey's, where the home grows.